The package is one of the lowest rated episodes of season 6, but fans cheered at the end of it when Desmond was finally brought back to the show. However, with a positive aspect back into the show, a negative aspect was also highlighted in terms of characters, Zoe and Seamus. Both of these characters did not sit well with audiences, especially Zoe, and I'm gonna tell you how I believe she could have easily been replaced by Walt. Before we do that, we have to address Zoe, the writer's room, as well as the depiction of African-Americans on Lost. Several people voiced criticism towards her character. Zoe is in 5 episodes of Lost, yet many others with 5 appearances or less were much more praised by the fans. Zoe is in more episodes than Widmore's employee Matthew Abaddon, and people still felt he had such a magnificent presence on the show.
There were no survivors of Oceanic 815. Don't ask questions, just do what you were hired for. Every member of this team was selected for a specific purpose. Everything relies on you getting them in, getting them out, and preventing anyone from getting killed.
And with the mention of Matthew Abaddon, I want to start this analysis with a different approach, something I discussed in my previous episode, that there were some racist undertones in the writer's room, as was reported on in a Vanity Fair article in May 2023, which was an excerpt from Maureen Ryan's book Burn It Down, about the lack of development of certain characters on the show. Don't worry, I'll still analyze the package, and I promise that this series won't fully devote itself to what happened in the writer's room, and still be much more about the content of the show. By now it is episode 10, and Lost has finally brought back Widmore and Desmond to the island. We've passed the halfway point of the final season. 2 characters we desperately want to see in the endgame of Lost are on the island. But there was also one other character we want to see play a part in the final steps of the show, Walt. They had killed off a couple of prominent African-Americans on the show. Mr. Echo was supposed to be on the show for many seasons, but due to many circumstances he left. That situation is a little bit complicated. I have a different video on that, although it was written and published before Maureen Ryan's article. The other character was Michael. Harold Perrineau even voiced concerns about this back in 2008, when he was brought back and then killed off quite abruptly. In season 5 they killed off Matthew Abaddon. Although he wasn't the main character at all, but still, with his very few episode appearances, kept us on the edge of our seats. If he wasn't killed off, it would make perfect sense if Abaddon, being Widmore's assistant who knows certain things happening in the future, would be on the island instead of Zoe. I would have loved if those ideas were challenged in the writer's room back in the day, and that Lost was more inclusive in this aspect, especially towards their African-American characters in the later part of the series. Michael, Walt and Rose got so much screen time and character interactions in season 1, and they were so three-dimensional, all of them.
Vincent took care of me when my mom died. And nobody would talk to me. They pretend like nothing happened. So I could talk to Vincent. He's a good listener. You could talk to him about Boone if you want.
Nobody blames you.
What?
For what happened to Claire. It's not your fault. You did everything that you could do, and you came very close to dying yourself.
Tons of fantastic moments. Rose wasn't a main cast member, but she had more appearances and important scenes in the first half of the show than the later. In the original version of Adrift, which was a Sawyer episode, Michael was asking all these questions about Sawyer's past, and there was only one piece of dialogue that mentioned Walt, which seemed unnatural. Hours after Walt was taken and Michael was more interested in Sawyer? Harold Perrineau voiced some concerns to the writers. They completely rewrote that episode, made it more about Walt, and then in turn made Michael utterly focused on Walt for the entire season before writing him off.
I'm here! Where are you, man? Walt!
The Michael who was a valuable member to the group, with his background in construction and illustration.
Alright, look, this area here is load bearing. We gotta dig where there's no danger of the wall buckling in on itself. Got this bamboo for the decking. Got a piece of the fuselage for cabin. Some storage bins.
See this junction here? Reroute some of the spring's water flow into a couple of suspended basins. Pop in some holes, you got showers. This way you keep the drinking water separate.
His leg was pinned in or something. Something heavy.
Okay, Jack, wait. The cargo container. We gotta do this. What about the axe?
Can't use the axe.
Had only one purpose this season, and at the end of it was going home with Walt, who was also getting written off, although that was for his age. The fans kept asking for Walt.
You at some point revisit the psychic's predictions about Claire's babies and Walt's seeming ability to either manipulate or predict future events.
What's going to happen to Walt? Because I actually really want to know what happens to him more than anyone else.
What's up with Walt? Will we eventually be seeing more of him and learning why he is so special? He seems to be even more special than our own man of faith, Mr. Locke. Second question is, will you get the chance to finally reveal how or why Walt kills animals?
Again and again. People love stories with mystical children, and every time he made an appearance, people went nuts. And seeing as Lost was really low on ratings in season 6, and people did not respond well to the new characters that were introduced this season, then let's take a step back to see what could have been done differently. Walt was a fan favorite, and having an African-American in the cast again, with a character's story, a prevalent voice in the endgame, could work well in the inclusivity and diversity, especially since they are soon going to kill off Son, Jin and Saeed. I know this sounds like a fan fiction idea, and you are free to skip to this part if you're not interested in hearing my opinion, but just for fun. It's just to hypothetically see if the show would be better, how I would prefer it to be. It's not because I think it's a lack of answers or that he should come back and simply explain about his age and powers and backwards talk. That would feel contrived and awkward. And there is a lot of brilliant ambiguity about Walt in the first 3 seasons that I still would want to keep. But Walt as well as Libby were characters so much of the fanbase want to see again, as evident by all the times the showrunners were asked about them. Libby was dead, but Walt wasn't. Malcolm David Kelly was always eager to come back. In an interview with the ODI in 2008, he talked about how they always socialized with him and went to dinner together whenever he came back to Hawaii to do these small cameos, so it never seemed like there was any animosity there. He always loved to come back to play Walt. Time and time again, the fans asked whether or not we would see Walt again.
The other question that that really percolates to the top is what's up with Walt? When are we going to see Walt again? Which is a great question. And what the actual answer is Malcolm David Kelly is now 39 years old.
like 6'5".
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
I was like,
Walt?
once this kid is taller than me, he cannot be on the show anymore.
I honestly don't think that Malcolm David Kelly being so much older would be a problem anymore. He still kept popping up and appeared in season 3, 4 and 5, and it seems a bit odd that there were 3 children that survived Flight 815, and they obviously became older during the show's run, but 2 of them still appeared in season 6, and Walt did not. Additionally, by the time we had passed season 5, we had accepted so much in terms of the island's mystical powers, as well as age. Jacob and Richard were both ageless. The opposite problem of Walt. When Richard says, "I'm this way because of Jacob," we still buy it. This situation is impossible in real life, but on Lost, especially so far into the show, we accept it. In this episode, The Package, Frank says it the best.
She hits her head and forgets English? We're supposed to buy that? Ask the man who communes with the dead.
Every fan was on board with Richard Alpert, and didn't think it was too unrealistic. And then we got the opposite spectrum. In season 5, we learned the age of certain characters. We have Ethan, who is 23, closing on 24 in this scene. The Beechcraft crashed in April, Ethan was born in July. Ben is the exact same age as Ethan in this scene, 23, closing to 24 years old. That's 4 years younger than Boone. Additionally, Daniel Faraday is 18 in this scene. I don't think it would be an issue at all if Walt came back to the island in season 6. So let's try to combine Zoe and Seamus into one character and try our best to add in Walt, starting from Recon. Obviously we need a character like Zoe plus Seamus on Widmore's team, a scientist to help carry out their test. This scene plays out exactly like we see on the show, but instead of a goofy looking Seamus with a gun, it is Walt who comes out of the bushes. Recon is such a low rated episode to begin with, so the surprise appearance of Walt could definitely boost the fans' appreciation. Hurley and Sawyer often gets to be the audience on the show, like after the teaser on Expose.
Nikki's dead. How's Nikki?
I could totally imagine Sawyer having a quick line, something about, I don't know, just wondering how one day you're a 6-year-old and now you're Michael Jordan, or something else comedic from Sawyer. They already did this humorous variation back in season 4.
What the hell do you mean you saw Walt? In a dream?
No dream, it was Walt. Only taller.
Taller? What, like a giant?
They would certainly exchange some words on their way to the submarine. We often get these offhand remarks instead of highly expository lines. So even though we wouldn't get his height and age addressed, we wouldn't care too much. It's a weird island. We don't get to see much of Widmore's team in this episode, but this would definitely fuel our imagination. A lot of fans felt a bit let down with this episode. So this would be an extra spark and would create the question, why is Walt back on the island? The next episode is The Package. At first they would have Walt join Widmore's team to the main island, because Walt can sense some situations, so he could probably sense where the man in black is. They attack the group. If we really want to do something completely ridiculous, Walt summons a polar bear as a distraction. You know, just to connect it with season 1 again, since season 6 always wanted to mirror season 1, but we can keep it as it is with the classical darts. Zoe, Seamus plus Walt pick up Jin, and Walt is there because he knows who Jin is. He can point him out of the group. A little bit later, Jin wakes up in room 23, and Walt is the one who turns off the music. Instead of clunky exposition by Zoe about the Dharma initiative, we do it about character. Walt turning off the music because it still haunts him resonates so much more due to his relationship with that room. Introducing room 23 in this episode with Jin and Walt is so much more impactful. Instead of a boring conversation about electromagnetic grids, this would create a more personal conversation between Walt and Jin. They share a lot of history, harkening back to season 1. Walt burned the raft, which Jin got the blame for. Jin is still looking for his wife, Sun, who obviously knows Walt. Walt remembers Sun.
What is that? Oh, I get it. It's like toothpaste. Chia. Chia?
While Walt is here, on the island looking for his father. He could have been recruited by Widmore just like Miles was for his special powers. Widmore would have learned about Walt and that he would be useful in the war, just like Desmond. But the naive Walt believes Widmore brought him to the island so they can all leave with his father Michael. He doesn't know that Widmore is a dangerous man. Jin, who was with Michael the moment he died, is unsure if he wants to break the news to Walt that his father is dead. Whether or not Walt will shed more light about his time in room 23, in the other's captivity, or what he is capable of doing is not that important. He doesn't have to do exposition. I think that a character-driven dialogue in this scene is much more engaging to us than what we originally got.
Well, that was weird, huh?
The whole scene with Zoe that we got just ends with Jin wanting to talk to her boss Charles Widmore, and the same thing is accomplished here if Walt simply replaces Zoe. Additionally, it would be quite cool if Walt was here at this scene later in the episode, witnessing the man in black masquerading as John Locke. The dialogue between those two would be a little bit different. Additionally, the next scene could very well be with Zoe and the grid maps, and we see that Walt enters the room with Jin. Walt and Zoe would take out the package from the sub at the end of the episode. Happily ever after, Walt is there with Desmond when he wakes up, along with Zoe. I mean, there's already 2 characters in the room, so it wouldn't be cramped at all. I think that it could be a nice symmetry. Both special characters. When Walt left, Desmond kind of took over that role, with him being the special one amongst the castaways. Walt was the one who could sense things. Him reading the comic book could be a foreshadowing of the polar bear, or that he is afraid of shark attacks.
What if a shark attacks?
Sharks ain't getting anywhere near us, man.
Now Desmond was the one seeing the future and being the one connected to the island. Obviously this episode would be where the scientists would play a much bigger role. They were a bit laughable as invaders, but Zoe and Seamus are right in their elements here in this scene. Walt is not a scientist, so he would simply just be here, escorting Desmond. At the end of the episode, some people questioned why Said just let Zoe go. I remember some fans wanting Said to kill her right there and then. I think it would be quite dramatic if Said shows up, kills Widmore's goons and for a moment points the gun at Walt, and the audience will briefly stiffen up, startled, asking the question, is Said going to shoot Walt just like he shot Ben in the last season? No, he lets him go. The last recruit. This is another cool situation. By replacing Zoe with Walt, you get so much tension. A badass Walt strolling into camp with no guns and no fear, looking slightly furious at Man in Black Locke, facing him off in that camp. The showrunners have said that season 6 should mirror season 1, as well as talk about the importance of characters. And I think Walt in this scene could highlight that. When we look at this scene, we get reminded of the numerous Walt and Locke scenes in season 1. the scene where he taught Locke to throw knives.
All right, picture it in your mind's eye. You know what that is, right? The mind's eye?
Like a picture in your head?
That's right. Now do it again. But see it. See it before you do it. Visualize the path. See it. See it.
Or even going back to their backgammon scene. Now we've come so far. Locke is dead and Walt is a grown man. The other survivors are obviously quite thunderstruck of seeing Walt. Then, without using a walkie-talkie, this happens.
Or next time, we won't miss.
Instead of this line, Walt says, "Next time, I won't miss." Did Walt fire a rocket at their camp by his own will? Suddenly we're thinking about season 1, when Locke taught Walt to use the mind's eye, and now he's using it against the man who looks like Locke. The rest of the Zoe scenes might play out a bit differently. Walt would eventually learn that Widmore tricked him, that Michael is dead. He now blames Widmore for putting his father on a boat that was rigged with C4. Whether or not this happens in The Last Recruit or The Candidate is the same for me. If Hurley is the one to break the news while they are in the cages, that is also a good idea. Or if Jin does while they are in captivity. Throughout these last episodes run, we would get a sense of why Widmore brought him to the island, especially when Widmore explains it in the penultimate episode. Bringing Walt to the island, his special powers, his clairvoyance, could be the key to find the source on the island that Zoe was trying to find on the grid maps. I think it would be better for a show with a more character-driven search, instead of Zoe needing Jin's help trying to locate the areas on a grid map. And that plan failed anyway, since Man in Black took Desmond away and they didn't need these maps in the end. Jack would know where to take Desmond because of his special power, his connection to the island after becoming the Protector. Walt also has some sort of power like this. Jack is now special, just like Walt. By the time we get to what they died for, things might play out slightly differently. Maybe Walt is the one who reveals to Man in Black Locke that Widmore is at the barracks. Maybe Walt is the one who tries to kill Widmore. What if it's even crazier? What if this scene took place and Man in Black Locke tried to kill Walt? Maybe it would be a twist that the blade would just go straight through, like an astral projection, and Walt was simply chilling out in the caves all along, reminiscent to that trick that Luke Skywalker does in The Last Jedi. The point is, Walt has distanced himself from the mission, from Widmore, and is now mourning. And if you're still following this fanfiction story, then I can say that I could be fine without any of the things I've mentioned. But if there's one cathartic scene we should have gotten with Walt in season 6, it's not an explanation on his appearances, or that mysterious computer, or the hows and whys of his powers, because the ambiguity is great. But what we should have gotten was a scene for all the dog lovers out there, for all those that cried in buckets at the end of Exodus Part 1. The reunion between Walt and Vincent. I mean, just remember how beautiful this scene was, and knowing that in the 6 seasons of Lost, Walt never reunited with his beloved dog ever again. It's such a sad moment that Vincent was with Walt for so many years through happiness and tragedy, and then he was gone. Michael came back shortly, Vincent sprinting towards him. Maybe Walt will come soon, but he didn't. And then the community he was with starting to shrink. All the other caretakers were gone, one after the other. He spent 3 years with Rose and Bernard, and was so joyous to see some of his old friends back in the season 5 finale. Hey, that's Sawyer. He was so much fun in the van, and he was on a raft too. Maybe Walt will come back now. But then they all leave. Then a little bit later, he runs back to the bamboo grove and lays down next to Jack so he doesn't have to die alone. And yet Vincent still has to wait patiently for Walt to come back. For those of you who have seen the wonderful Futurama episode Jurassic Park, you know what I'm referring to.
For 1,000 summers, I will wait for you.
Luckily, in the canon of the show, Walt does come back in 2010, during the epilogue. So we can infer that he does reunite with Vincent. But of all the tear-inducing moments of Lost, all the reunions, this is the one I missed the most. Vincent finally reuniting with Walt. So if we go by my Walt replaces Zoe scenario, what's up with the epilogue? It would still be the same. Walt could be at the beach camp, maybe he's building a raft to make up for the one he burned, so he could leave. But then it's approached by Hurley and Ben, who convinces him to come to the newly refurbished barracks and offer a job, and to help his father move on. Episode breakdown of the package. Now that we're done with the fan theory, let's quickly break down the character movements in the episode. Widmore's team have taken an outrigger and gone to Man in Black's camp. Man in Black Locke moves away, heading to the beach camp. While he's gone, Widmore's team attacks, stuns the group, and take Jin. However, one thing happens when Man in Black Locke leaves for the camp. He sees Richard and Hurley walking in a wildly different direction. Where are they going? To the temple again? So he's gonna follow them and observe them near the stone bench before he transforms into smoke again, heading towards the beach camp. Ilana's group discusses their options. Sun storms off to her old garden where she is approached by Jack, and they have a conversation about Jacob's lighthouse. After Jack leaves, Sun is startled by Man in Black Locke, who promises to take her to Jin. I like his approach. The hand is like the lure of the devil, but she doesn't take it. He also uses his hand later in the episode to bring Claire closer to him. Claire is after all on his side, claimed by him, and the idea of the hand is highlighted once again at the end of the episode when Sun accepts the hand of the future protector, Jack. She is with him. Sun flees, and with Man in Black Locke in pursuit, she knocks herself out on a tree branch. Man in Black Locke will head back. Shortly afterwards, Ben finds Sun unconscious and brings her to the camp. Back at Hydra Island, Jin awakens in room 23, at the Hydra station where he meets Zoe. Man in Black Locke returns to his camp and finds all of them unconscious following the attack. He awakens Saeed and discovers Jin has been taken. They will both go to the other island.
What's up with the guns? You two going somewhere?
We're taking a boat ride over to the other island.
I think they both sit in the outrigger, and then at some point Saeed hops out to swim to the other side, near the dock over here to spy on them. On the beach at Hydra Island, Man in Black Locke confronts Charles Widmore and announces war has come to the island. I like that he says a wise man. One part of Man in Black kind of admires Charles Widmore. Widmore would rig the plane with explosives and then find Sun's digital camera. Back on the beach camp, Richard and Hurley return from the jungle. Sun berates Richard in Korean and leaves the group. In the Hydra station, Jin meets Widmore and receives Sun's camera, which contains photographs of his daughter Ji-yeon. In an off-screen scene, Jin must have helped Zoe with the grid maps pointing where these locations are, since she asked about them earlier. I guess they're trying to find the place where Desmond can withstand the massive surge of electromagnetism, aka the heart of the island, something I would think would be much cooler if Walt was in the picture instead. If we look at the map, it's quite hard to tell. There's actually two versions of the map. We can see that one on the table. This one and this one. This one was sold at the Lost auction, is a close-up version of this one. The maps have no compass bearings. Additionally, these shades of grey at first looked like water, but it has a different color than this one. And if we see closely on the map, this shore looks like the ocean, while this looks like a shade of grey on top of a mountain chain. Since we see the elevations, I would say that this is just Dharma's way of distinguishing different territories, where they can walk, where they are forbidden to enter, where they are allowed to build, the hostile territories, and so on. A user created this map. However, this is not the ocean as seen clearly here, and also this is not the ocean either. This is just where the map ends, and you can see the markers over here. So where on the island does this depict? I tried rotating and see if it matches up with the various pockets we know, but it doesn't. One area that is close and matches up with the mountains over here, which means that the rock with a hole in it is one of the electromagnetic pockets. That's cool. That's area D. There are many pockets of electromagnetism on the island anyway, not just 3. Area A and B are unknown. I will come back to these 2 areas. One of them will be revealed later in the series. Saeed approaches Widmore's submarine from the water and witnesses Zoe and Seamus dragging Desmond along the dock.
How much did you give him?
Obviously, I gave him too much, but we needed him knocked out for the trip.
Next week will be the shortest Lost Journeys episode of Season 6. It's going to be about Happily Ever After. If you want, you can like this video. It really helps a small channel like this one. See you in a week.